Oh, he writes me a letter. Dear Michael, if you seek God, come to Puttaparthi. God is love. That's all I could say. You don't know enough about Sai-Baba to make a judgment, and you've already made a judgment that he's a charlatan or whatever. How dare you? So I'm chastising myself while I'm waiting for Swami to come. So by and by, Swami comes to the men's side, and I know that he knows everything I was thinking, and that embarrasses me. So I kind of scoot behind. There's a big tree. I kind of scoot behind the trunk, so that when Swami comes by in the front, he won't see me, because I'm now embarrassed, because I know he knows. And this is all just, coming out of the consciousness. So he stops in front of the tree and looks around. One of the young college students that was in this interview with us and Swami finds me. I was coming out of the temple from singing evening bhajans. He says, "You're the American that was in the group interview with us, right?" I said, "Correct." He says, "Good, I'm glad I found you." He says, "Swami asked me to give you this message." Okay. He said, "He wants you to know that time does not permit the giving of the promised second interview. But he wants you to know he's always with you. And whenever you need him, he'll be there." That pledge, which happened in November 7th, has been fulfilled every day of my life since then. Swami, we're here because, and Swami says, "I know. There's a problem medically with your child. Your child can't suckle. She can't take nutrition in the normal way." He said, "Give me the child." That's one of the child. In tears again. Swami puts his thumb in the baby's mouth. The baby starts suckling. Gives the baby back and said, "The medical condition is healed." Mr. Kwai said, from that moment on, I became a believer. My name is Michael, last name Dave, D-A-V-E. And in a couple months, I'll be 84 years old. I'm originally from a small little town 30 miles west of Cleveland, Ohio, called Lorain, Ohio, which was a small steel town of approximately 20,000 people. I grew up with both parents. They were in my life until the time that each of them passed away much later in my life. But yeah, from birth, I lived with both my mother and father. I have a brother, Jamil, and I have a sister, Rochelle. I was born approximately 2 years before the beginning of World War II. So the first 2 years, I'm a kid, child. But with the advent of World War II, life for everybody changed, including the life with my parents, and therefore with me. With the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, life, and I'm only 2.5 at that time, life as we knew it completely changed. Because we're now on a serious war footing. I grew up in a time of great tribulation in this country and in the world. Basically, it was from 1941 to 1945. And then things kind of settled down. I think at that point I was in the first grade. And just being a kid, doing kid stuff, because now there's no war issues or anything like that. So a period of normalcy occurred. That normalcy was changed dramatically when I was 6.5 or 7, and I developed a very serious condition called glomerular nephritis. The urology department at Cleveland Clinic, and I still remember this from 1946, Dr. Higgins, he said, your son is so ill and his condition is so advanced that we don't know if he's going to live. To give him the best chance, you're going to have to isolate him in your home. I ultimately recovered from that condition, but it was that experience of living in isolation for 7 or so months really contributed to my spiritual growth. My father, as I said, was a very powerful man. He was, in today's parlance, a gangster. And he worked with the Cleveland Mafia. And he started off when he was young. His first job was driving for the Cleveland Mafia all of their illegal alcoholic beverages because it was prohibition. And so he started driving right at he was 16 or so, and he became quite the driver. And during the years that he was driving for the Mafia, the police could never law enforcement could never catch him. He souped up his engine, he puts rear springs on his car so that when it was loaded with booze, it would sit level and not be dragging this way. I mean, really great. And then at some point, my father, having the entrepreneurial spirit, decided, why am I doing this for them? I can do it on my own. Decided, he's going to go on his own. He's going to use my parents' basement and my mother's parents' basement and put it in a still, and in both places then distill whiskey. Who needs the Mafia? And that's what he did. Unfortunately, along the way, both stills exploded because it's highly explosive so he got convicted. He spent 3 years in the Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. So anyhow, he gets out of prison and doesn't know what to do, and then realizes, well, his whole life has been wrapped up in some aspect of the alcohol business. So he's going to open a bar. Shortly after the end of the war, my father and mother took me to California to visit his brother, who was in business out here. And my mother fell in love with California, particularly when you're in a crappy little small town, steel town, with smoke billowing up from the steel mill and whatever. So that was LA was like paradise. So she worked on my father to move, and she finally won the day, and we moved. So now in the 10th grade, tough guy in Spanish class. I get kicked out of Spanish class because the teacher says I'm very disruptive, and all I want to do is, flirt with the girls or BS, but not learn. So I got put into a class called agriculture. This 12th grader, Al Crow, who was president of one of the 2 toughest clubs at Hamilton High School called the Regents. And I'm just tilling the soil and planting my radishes or what. He comes over to me and says, oh, you're new here. I said, yeah. He said, I haven't seen you before. I said, well, I just moved here recently, and then I got kicked out of Spanish class. He said, oh. He said, well, my name's Al Crow, and I'm the president of the club called the Regents. He said, and I'm intimidated by him because he's in the 12th grade, I'm in the 10th grade, and he worked out. He was a tough dude. He said, would you like to meet the Regents? I had no interest in meeting the Regents, but I'm not going to say no, because he's a tough guy. So I said, sure. So unbeknownst to me, the club, the Regents, had a procedure whereby if you were up for consideration to become a member voted in, they never told that candidate, because you could easily say, I'm not interested, and that would be a downer to the clubs. They always only wanted to have people that were interested in the club. So he said, what do you think of the guys? I said, I think they're great guys. And then all these guys in the club gathered around me, and they said, so if you had a chance to join the Regents, would you? And again, I really don't care, but am I going to say no? No, I'm not. I said, sure. And with that, they thrust out their hands to shake my hands, threw a Regent jacket on me, and said, congratulations, you're now a member of the Regents. And in those days, several of the clubs that were the tough guy clubs kind of ruled the school. So now in the 10th grade, I'm a member of the ruling class, so to speak. And the experience, because I then immediately became an office holder in the club, ultimately rising to become the president of the club, it was the greatest time of my life, because we were so feared in high school that we could walk down a crowded hallway between classes, and the crowds would part like the waves of the sea, because they knew that as they bumped into something, we were so, loose that we just punched them back or something. So I had, I tell people now who complain about their high school years, I said probably the 3 years of high school was the greatest time of my life because we ruled school. We had an encounter with a group of young Mexican gangsters, our age, but they had zip guns and things like that. We didn't have zip guns. And it came to a head at Rancho Park, which is on Motor Avenue, real close here. We get to my friend's house, who's the former president of my club, and his parents were very wealthy. We get to his house, and I said, well, what are we going to do? He says, no problem. He goes to his father's was an avid hunter, opens the gun case, and is handing out rifles and shotguns to all 6 of us. And I'm going, no, I ain't going to play this game. But I'm a tough guy, so what are you going to say? No, I don't want to do it. Because now you're showing that you're like a fraidy cat or something. But I always had ideas. So I tell Al, who's handing out his father's guns, I said, wait a second, I got an idea. So what's that? I said, I'll call up the West LAPD and sound like an older person and say I was just driving on Motor Avenue. I saw this big altercation at Rancho Park. Great idea, do it. So we did it. I says, and we'll wait about 15 minutes and then we'll drive by. Sure enough, the place is loaded with cop cars, red lights going, Mexican kids up against their cars like this and whatever. So we go by and we flip them off, screw you, buddy, and this and that. So, of course, I was viewed as a genius. I said, because they said, well, how'd you come up with that? I said, because I ain't gonna spend any time in prison. My father spent time in prison. I ain't gonna be the next generation. And I knew that if we went there with guns, we wouldn't just wave them, we'd use them. Because the Mexican kids had zip guns and things. So there would have been a gunfight. Someone would have been injured. Good luck for the rest of your future. So I said I couldn't have that. So of course I was branded as a genius for coming up with all that. And so when that episode ended, I decided, I got to change my life. So I started becoming more scholastic and ended up, as I say, matriculating to Santa Monica. It was around Easter time in my 12th grade year. And my father had given me a car, so I was very mobile. And I got out of checker school the last day, and one of my club brothers, we had girlfriends in Palm Springs, which is where everyone accumulated. And it was late at night, because I just gotten out of work, and it was raining. It was in April 1957. Easter weekend. I'm doing about 70 miles an hour on the M10, which was not yet a freeway. It was just 2 lanes, 4 lanes, 2 on each side, divided by a dirt median. And it started to rain. And as I'm doing about 70, I approached this car in my lane, and I was in the fast lane, and it was attempting to turn off, cross the median, and go somewhere. But its rear end was still sticking in my lane, obviously obstructing my right-of-way. So, I've been driving for a couple of years, but not really as skilled as you could be. So I unfortunately hit the brakes. And my car spun out at 70 miles an hour. And the force of the impact of my car was so great that it literally threw me out of the car. So I'm thrown out of the car at 70 miles an hour. The highway patrolman says, by rights, we should be arresting you for reckless driving. But you're one lucky SOB. I said, what do you mean? He said, the guy who you hit was a private in the Marine Corps. and he was fooling around with his superior's wife. And they were in the process of turning off and going into a motel on the other side of the street. So they don't want anything mentioned about this. They don't want to press charges. Done. I go, Jesus. Could you believe that? Right? That happened, and I became more serious about school. So to finish out the high school, I started becoming more scholastic. But I found out that my grades were so poor I couldn't matriculate to either SC or UCLA. The only place I could go was junior college, Santa Monica. So I was just going along, and things started shaping up where I met a lady that I was dating. I had separated from my first wife. I was dating her. She became my second wife, Lorraine. And I really liked Lorraine, and she liked me, but she was of Spanish, Mexican heritage. And a month or two into our relationship, she says, our relationship's not going to go anywhere. I said, why? She says, well, you don't believe in God, and I believe in God. So I'm trying to keep it together. I know it's about to end. And she comes to me a week or two later. She says, Michael, I went to see this psychic. Would you like to see this psychic? So I said, oh, yeah, I'll go. And I'm going only, King's X, not really caring. And we go, and I go with her. And we go to Elizabeth's house. She says, well, I'm going to do a full workup on you. I said, what does that mean? She said, I'm going to do your astrological chart. I'm going to do your numerology. I'm going to read your palm. And then I'm going to do a psychic reading all at one time, which was, like jackpot type. And I was not aware that that was so significant of an event, but I said, okay. So it took her about an hour or two to do all that, and I'm waiting around. So she just comes over and she said, okay, I've done all the work. She said, do you have any questions? I go, well, actually not, because I came here looking for answers, but I don't have any questions. And I was trying to be diplomatic, because quite frankly, I didn't care one way or the other. She said, okay, let me tell you about you. She says, you're a very spiritual young man. And she said, in fact, in your past life, you were a spiritual teacher in India. Now this is like, I'm not ready for all this. So I'm new to this whole thing with the psychic and spiritual readings. So this is during this initial interview. She said, have you ever heard of something called automatic writing? And I happened to be very well read. I mean, I was reading the biggest paper in the Midwest outside of Chicago and before New York was the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And because I was interested in the Cleveland Indians, I would always read it every morning when I was like 9, 10 years old. She says, well, do you know about automatic writing? I said, well, I read this article by Billy Rose, and he described this way, in this fashion. And I tell her what I read in Billy Rose's column. She says, that's exactly it. She says, would you like to do that? And I want to say, not exactly. Because again, I'm still in a worldly headset. And she said, you really should think about doing it. I don't know why, within a day or two after I had this 2-hour audience with her, I decided I'm going to try. And she told me what it was with automatic writing. You take a blank piece of paper, a pen, blank out your mind, and just have your hand guided by another level of your consciousness. So I did that, and the first 3 days after I started doing that, I wrote a short story and a poem and something else. Fourth day, I write the following. Soaring through the universe, there is only one love and one energy, and that's the love of God. And it fills the energy, fills the universe. And that's what holds the whole universe together. It's going to make me cry because it was so profound. That was from like 1967. And then I joined the Self-Realization Fellowship, and they had a 3-year program of lesson plans they sent you on your spirituality, and I took those. Early 1973, Lorraine and I had been married. We just had our first child, Adam, in February of 73. And in the meanwhile, a couple years earlier, I had met this lovely young lady named Jenny Katsumanis. Jenny calls me, she says, Michael, I have to go out of town on business, out of the country, and I put my car in storage, and I need 2 agreements done, but I don't know how to have you give it to me. So I prepared the agreements, whatever she needed, and I said, well, I can drive them over to your house because she lives 2.5 miles away from my office. And I did. I walk into her house, and on the wall, with a picture of the SRF line of gurus, Lahira Messiah, Sri Yukteswar, Jesus Christ, Krishna, Babaji, and Paramahansa. I go, I know them because I had been given the bug of the autobiography of a yogi when I was just 15. And I read it, and I knew it was truth, but I wasn't ready for it in terms of to practice it. But it was launched in my, so when I said, oh, and I read it, she blew her mind. She says, no one I know of knows them. And you're a lawyer who definitely wouldn't know them, and yet you know them. And I told her a little bit about my story. I get a call from her in June or July of that year, and she said, I understand that you and Lorraine had a child. Yes, we did. So I have some gifts, I'd like to bring them to you. And Lorraine, who always was interested in interviewing people, she says, I understand that you went on a trip out of the country. Jenny said, yes, I did. Oh, where'd you go? She said, you really want to know? I said, yeah. She said, well, I went to India. I said, well, why would you go to India? I said, well, I heard about this holy man and I wanted to see him. Lorraine says, could you tell us of your experiences with this holy man, which was Sai-Baba? So Jenny, who was a very lovely young lady, sitting across the table from us in our den, started telling us of her experiences with Sai-Baba. Jenny says, well, I do have some slides of my trip. Would you like to see them? Yeah. I'll come over next week with a slide projector, the slides, etc. So she comes over the next week. And in the meanwhile, my dear friend, Richard Kaplowitz, who was my partner in crime in terms of all the playing around we used to do and drinking and whatever, and who was a world-class photographer. Matter of fact, he apprenticed under Richard Avedon, who was one of the well-known fashion photographers. So I got nothing else going on Friday. Can I come by? Hang out with you guys? Yeah, sure, no problem. So he's there with us, and Jenny fixes up her slide projector and is showing the slides. And Richard, in the middle of the slide show, says, Jenny, can I ask you a question? She says, yeah. He says, are you a professional photographer? She says, no. He says, well, how did these pictures come about? She said, well, I decided I wanted to, capture some of my experiences in India, a country I've never been in, with this holy man. And I did it. He said, well, let me tell you something. I am a professional photographer. And there is not one picture I've ever taken where one sufficed. He said, we have these motorized mounts, and whether it's a still photo or whether it's a human being, it just rips off 100 to 200 shots, and then we try and sort through and find the one shot that captures the essence of the subject that we're trying to photograph. He said, I have to tell you, every picture with Sai-Baba in it captured his essence. And I, as a professional photographer, that is humanly impossible. You can't do that. And yet every one captured his essence. And with that, my worldly friend who loved fast women, booze, great food, making money, said, I have to go and see him. He writes me a letter. Dear Michael, if you seek God, come to Puttaparthi. God is love. That's all I could say. So he comes back and he says, you gotta go now. I said, well, that's great. I said, but we have a young child. We have a very busy practice. Although we have a part-time housekeeper, we have no one to stay with Adam. By this time was like 6 months old, 7 months old. He said, no problem. He said, my girlfriend and I will stay. So we go. And I'm questioning my sanity. Okay, I know Richard went off the deep end, but that don't mean that this is reality. Why am I doing this? But we're there. And we had some problems along the way because we took TWA from LA to Bombay, And when we changed planes in Rome, it turns out that TWA went on strike. So we're stuck in the Bombay airport for 12 hours. I have a pregnant wife. And at this point, she was pregnant with Justin, our second son. Don't know what to do. She's hungry, she's pregnant. And I'm looking around, and Bombay then was about 10 levels below what it is now. So you can only imagine how bad it was. So this young man comes up. He says, "Oh, hi, how are you?" He says, "You were on the same flight with me on the delayed flight that we finally got from Rome to Bombay." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I know you're intimidated by the circumstances." He says, "And I know you haven't eaten, right?" I said, "We haven't eaten." He says, "You got to eat. When your wife's pregnant, you got to eat." So about half an hour later, comes back with 2 big masala dosas, all vegetarian, which of course we wolfed out. We were so hungry. So I said, "Well, thank you so much." And he wouldn't even accept payment from me. He says, "So at least tell us your name." "My name is Sai. I've never been in with it was my move." I said, "God, we are being directed." So we hear that Sai-Baba is in Bangalore. He's not in Puduparty, and he's at the boys' college. So the next morning early on, we hire a car and driver and go out there to the college. So we were there, and Swami came out. We're filled with excitement because we'd heard about this holy man, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, Swami goes by, Lorraine goes by me, and no recognition, nothing. So of course me, the big ego of them, very disappointed. Supposed to be a holy man, supposed to know everything that's happening. He should know that we were seeking God, and he just totally ignores us. So that put me on a bummer for the next couple of days because we kept going out to the college, and Swami by then had left for Puduparty. So we hire a car and driver to go to Puduparty. So in those days, the ashram was very rough. Didn't have any of the big buildings or anything. And we sat out in the dirt. And it was kind of pastoral because there was big trees and whatever. So the women are on one side, I'm over here with the men. And while I'm sitting there waiting for Swami to come by the men's section, this tremendous feeling of guilt comes over me. Like, you don't know enough about Sai-Baba to make a judgment. And you've already made a judgment that he's a charlatan or whatever. How dare you? So I'm chastising myself while I'm waiting for Swami to come. So by and by, Swami comes to the men's side. And I know that he knows everything I was thinking. And that embarrasses me. So I kind of scoot behind. There's a big tree. I kind of scoot behind the trunk so that when Swami comes by in the front, he won't see me because I'm now embarrassed because I know he knows. And this is all just, coming out of the consciousness. So he stops in front of the tree and looks around the trunk, and his eyes lock on mine. I fell into a trance. I felt the world didn't mean anything anymore. I didn't care about the heat. I didn't care about the filth. Which was filthy. I didn't care about the crowds. I didn't care whether he ate, didn't eat, whatever. I was totally on a spiritual adventure, which I'd never experienced before. It's time for afternoon darshan. Sai-Baba comes out. He's walking through, and as he walks by me, he just casually waves to me. And I thought he was telling me to leave the ashram because I was having negative thoughts. That's what was my mind. So I get up and start to turn to walk out, and the young man, no, he's picking you for a private audience. Go, go, go. Swami's, nodding and acknowledge each person. And as Lorraine's in front of me, as we get to where Swami puts his hand and says, "Where's your husband?" Or is it has been? And he starts doing this little mantra. Husband, has been. Husband, has been. Well, later on it turns out everyone thought, isn't it cute that he was trying to find out how to pronounce husband? No, he was calling it has been. So we go in and he gives us a 1 hour lecture. So there's 16 of us in the room. We finish with the audience. And as we're walking out, Swami said, how long are you going to be here? And I said, another 5 days. He says, good. He says, enough time. I'll give you a private audience, you and your wife. Great. It's now the night before we're scheduled to leave because we have fixed return tickets. And one of the young college students that was in this interview with us and Swami finds me. I was coming out of the temple from singing evening bhajans. He says, you're the American that was in the group interview with us, right? I said, Troy. He says, good, I'm glad I found it. He says, Swami asked me to give you this message. Okay. He said, he wants you to know that time does not permit the giving of the promised second interview. But he wants you to know he's always with you. And whenever you need him, he'll be there. That pledge, which happened in November of 70, has been fulfilled every day of my life since then. So it's 1980, and the Fourth World Conference is going to happen in Puttaparthi, and there's going to be over 200,000 people going. And I'm going with my friend Richard, who I told you about, and his wife. And I'm very, very impatient. I don't want to hang out in Bombay and shop. I don't want to hang out in Bangkok. I just want to get to Puttaparthi, because that's the reason I'm here. Not to shop, not to sightsee, not to meet people. It's one-on-one, me and Swami. So I know that's what I'm supposed to do, and that's what I want to do. So I'm at the airport in Bangalore in 1980. It's November, teeming with people, and they all didn't have the foresight to plan out how the hell they're going to get from Bangalore to this little village. So my cab pulls up, and they call my name, and I'm there, and I'm walking, and I'm the only one that's going to be in the cab. It's my cab, I rented it. As I'm walking to the cab, this extremely well-dressed, obviously highly affluent Indian gentleman comes up to me. Don't know who he is, but he says, are you going to be going to Puttaparthi? He says, is that going to be your cab? I said, yeah. He says, do you have family going with you? I said, no, I'm going to be alone. He said, look, I didn't have the foresight to book transportation in advance. I said, what's going on? Can I share the cab with you? I'll pay for the whole cab trip. I said, you don't have to pay for the whole cab trip. And I'll pay for it, and if you want to pay for half to make you feel better, that's fine, no problem. His name was Mr. Kamani. He and his wife had a baby girl. And the baby girl, as it turned out, was born with a major medical condition. The condition was that she couldn't suckle. Whether it was missing organs, muscles, or whatever. And she's a baby. You give her, if not the nipple, then the bottle. She couldn't suckle. And to the point where they had to, from the time she was born, put her on IV nutrition. So he's telling me this. I said, oh my God, that's horrible. He says, yeah, it was. And he said, I went to the finest doctors in the UK, the finest doctors in the US, to find a solution to my beloved daughter's condition. Everyone said it was hopeless. They were missing muscles, tissue, whatever, and they're not going to be able to store the throat. That's a congenital defect, and yeah, you'll be able to keep her on a bottle and maybe feed her intravenously, but in the time to come, she's going to pass away. That's the reality. And he said, his brother Purnachandra came to him and said, look, I understand the problems with your daughter. You've been to the finest doctors in the UK and in the United States, and they all said it's hopeless. He says, and I know you have absolutely no belief in Sai-Baba, and you, in fact, make fun of me because I'm such a staunch devotee. He says, what do you have to lose? You've tried every worldly thing, doesn't work. Take the little baby to see Sai-Baba. And he's telling me this story, he says, we get to Puttaparthi, And as soon as we arrive, a student comes out and said, Swami is waiting to see you. Oh, yeah. He said, so we take our daughter, take the doctor, take the nurse, my wife and I, we go in. Swami comes into the interview room, initial greetings. He said, Swami, we're here because, and Swami says, I know. There's a problem medically with your child. Your child can't suckle, she can't take nutrition in the normal way. He said, give me the child. That's my child. Bring tears again. Swami puts his thumb in the baby's mouth. The baby starts suckling. Gives the baby back and said, her medical condition is healed. And Mr. Kwai said, from that moment on, I became a believer. Ever since the time that Swami came into my consciousness, it was clear that I was supposed to see him, be his devotee, and be constantly there. So when a friend of ours, of Sylvia's and I, she also went to India because of us, she says, you got to tell your story. I said, I know, but I don't have time, blah, blah. Sylvia can't do it. She says, well, I'll do it. And she had, I think, recently been laid off from her job. She was a high executive with one of the record companies or something, or movie companies, I think. So she would come and I would dictate things to her. Yeah, and she says, oh, do you have a name for the book? I said, yeah. I said, what is it? I said, Guided by the Light. And if you look at every one of my experiences, they didn't come out of my head. I was guided. That's why I know I'm so blessed.